Hello, this video is titled How a Christian Should Vote. Well, the proverb says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, the people groan. So this is God's formula. If the people are groaning, then the wicked must be ruling. In light of this, how should Christians vote? Well, they should vote according to three primary principles. The first is the purpose of civil government. Romans says this, "For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong." Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and he will commend you. This is in Romans 13. So the digest of what God's purpose for civil government is this: simply to restrain evil and encourage the good. However, when the wicked rule, they invert the role of civil government and they promote evil and they restrain good. So a Christian's first principle for voting for a civil leader is, will that leader help restrain evil and encourage good? The second principle is the Exodus 18:21 civil leadership principle. And in Exodus 18:21, Moses' father-in-law Jethro comes to him and advises Moses on how to pick civil leaders. He said this, "But select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain." And you can read about this in Exodus 18. So let's break this down a little further. That passage says, "But select." That is, we get to select. The people, we the people select. This was true in the Hebrew Republic. This is true in the United States. It's a talent that God has given us to select our leaders. And when we select, we should choose capable people, capable men from all the people, meaning that somebody doesn't have to be necessarily from the faith community because they need to be capable first and foremost. But along with that, they need to be men who fear God, who are trustworthy, and hate dishonest gain. And those would all be descriptors of how they act in their civil office. They need to act in their civil office with a reverence and fear of God, that meaning that they will ultimately be held accountable for their actions in office. They need to be trustworthy, and they need to hate dishonest gain, not using their civil office to advance their own wealth and their own fame. Principle number 3 is God's evaluation formula. And God's evaluation formula can be found in the book of Kings and in Chronicles. And God's evaluation formula is very simple. The kings either did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, or they did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord as it pertains to their civil office. That's God's formula for judging a civil leader. So the criteria for selecting civil leaders would be these: that when they hold office, they align with the purposes of government, that is, to restrain evil and allow good to flourish, not the inverse of promoting evil and restraining good. Second, they need to meet the Exodus 18 requirements of being capable, fear of God, knowing that they'll be accountable for what they do in office, trustworthy, and honest. And then they need to meet God's standard for civic leadership, and that is they do what is right in the eyes of the Lord while they're in their civil office. So, how should a Christian go about selecting someone to vote for? You're voting for a governing worldview, a platform, not a person. The two political parties today have governing worldviews that are directly opposed. One leans toward righteous policies that allow people and societies to flourish, or at least it restrains evil. The other platform heavily leans toward unrighteous and even wicked policies that cause people and societies to be oppressed. Every political leader has flaws, personalities, past sins, policies that you may or may not fully embrace, but you can't say there are no difference between candidates. We need to remember, too, that King David was an adulterer, murderer, and had a screwed up family life, and yet when he was in civil office, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and God still used him. The measure of a good political leader and a party platform is answering the question, how does it align with God's purpose for government? That is, the restraining of evil and allowing good to flourish, versus using government to promote evil and restraining the good. Almost all the news media, Hollywood, entertainment, stars, etc., are against God's principles and do everything in their power to lie, besmirch, and misreport on anyone not on board with their agenda. Ignore the media. These are God's principles for selecting civil leaders. They're aligned with the purposes of God, they meet the Exodus 18 requirement, and they meet God's standard for civic leadership. Misapplied criteria are often used by Christians. Often, the requirements for elders and the requirements for deacons are applied to civil leaders in the selecting of them, and this should not be the case. Let's look at those lists real quick. In the service of elders, it says in 1 Timothy that an overseer in the church should be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not giving to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well. And it concludes by saying, if anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? This list, although it would be nice to have in a civil leader, is a list, God's list, for spiritual leadership within the domain of the church. Likewise, this is true of deacons. In the same way, deacons are to be worthy of respect, sincere, not indulging in much wine, and not pursuing dishonest gain, hold of the deep truths of the faith with a clear conscience, be faithful to his wife, manage his children and his household well. Again, this is a list of requirements for a deacon serving within a church, and it would be nice to have in a civil leader, but this is not God's requirement for civil leadership. And so we need to not use these criteria as primary in how we choose our leaders. So with this in mind, Christians need to go forward and be a steward of their vote. My name's Craig Seibert. Thanks for listening.